This is where Greyhound Bus 1170 came to a sudden stop 10 years ago.
Anything to the victim was just sleeping with his headphones on. He was leaning against the window, sleeping, doing his own little thing. He wasn't bothering the guy.
Canada is a country that is definitely not known for crime, especially brutal crimes. I'm not denying the brutal crime cases we have had, but if you were looking at a top 10 craziest crime cases list on the internet, you are not going to find a Canadian crime there. So when stuff like this does happen in our country, it gains nationwide notoriety, and today we'll be discussing a case that you Canadians may or may not have heard of. This is the case of Vincent Lee. It took place on July 30th, 2008. In Edmonton, Tim McLean, a carnival barker, boarded Greyhound Bus 1170 to return home to Winnipeg. For the majority of the ride, he sat alone, headphones on. At a stop in Erickson, Vincent Lee would get on the bus, initially sitting at the front, then moving towards McLean.
Bus continued on for, I'd say, another half an hour, and we stopped for a cigarette break. He got out, smoked a cigarette casually. I think he talked a little bit with another girl that was there. And when he got on the bus this time, he came right back to the back and sat next to the victim, who was right behind me, and put his things above in the overhead there and sat down. He didn't say anything to the victim. The victim was just sleeping with his headphones on. He was leaning against the window, sleeping, doing his own little thing. He wasn't bothering the guy. I didn't hear any words at all exchanged between the two. I didn't see the attacker, talk to anybody else but the one girl there.
The two didn't exchange. However, shortly after, things would take a very, very dark turn.
Rambo knife, pretty much. It was a big survival knife like this.
Was attacking his seatmate, Timothy McLean.
Stabbed to death on board this bus was...
Seemingly out of nowhere, Vincent brandished a large knife and began to repeatedly stab Tim. The other passengers were horrified, and the driver would almost instantly pull over to the side of the road. As the passengers fled, the driver and two others would attempt to help McLean, only to be swung at. The entire bus had to be evacuated, and Lee was left to his work. The thing with the murder is, he wouldn't stop stabbing Tim, and eventually would go as far as to decapitate Tim, sever multiple parts of his body, and consume some of his flesh, all while displaying it all across the bus.
Still kept stabbing him. Everybody got off the bus. Me and a trucker that had stopped, and the Greyhound driver ran up to the door to maybe see if the guy was still alive or we could help or something like that. And when we all got up, we seen that the guy was cutting off the guy's head. He was cutting off the guy's head there, and then he saw us. He came back to the front of the bus, told the driver to shut the door. He pressed the button and the door shut, but it didn't shut in time, and the guy was able to get his knife out and take a swipe at us, so we backed off the door, and I ran around the backside of the bus driver took off, and then we both returned to the front to see what had happened, and he hadn't gotten off the bus. The door was still open. We shut the bus door that time and shut it. It was at that point that he came, started walking to the front of the bus, and he had the head in his hand, and he just looked at us like this and dropped it on the ground, like, totally calm.
The RCMP would be called, resulting in a 5-hour standoff ending in Lee attempting to escape the bus through a window, resulting in his arrest. Tim McLean's remains had been scattered across the bus, with his nose, ear, and tongue found in Lee's pockets. So we're all asking the same question. Why? It's worth noting that Vincent and Tim did not know each other, and had never once crossed paths before. During investigations, interviews, and the trial itself, the truth behind this fairly random and obscene act would come to light. But to understand, we have to dive into Vincent's time spent in Canada. Vincent was an immigrant from China who came to Canada in June 2001. Vince would work many jobs while spending his time here, with the most notable job taking place at Grant Memorial Church. Here's where Lee had told his psychiatrist, Stanley Yaren, that he had converted to Christianity and was baptized after he heard what he called the voice of God. He said that this voice had called him things such as the second coming of Jesus, and that Lee was going to be the one to save Earth from an alien invasion. This was all likely the delusions of undiagnosed schizophrenia, and these delusions would drive Lee into a downward spiral in the months leading up to the Greyhound bus incident. According to his wife, Lee would disappear from home for days at a time and wouldn't sleep or eat. He would cry, describing these voices of God talking to him. He even began to carry a knife on him to protect him from aliens, that same knife that would be used in the killing of Tim McLean. Lee would break up with his wife, hop from job to job and town to town, and these delusions he had been experiencing would only worsen with the passage of time. At one point, he attempted to walk from Toronto to Winnipeg on foot as guided by the voice, where police would find him walking up the side of the highway, malnourished, and as Lee said, following the sun. Even when the people in his life reported he had been getting better for a time period, Lee would further deteriorate before finally leaving permanently, where he would board a Greyhound bus to Winnipeg, sleep in the station at Erickson, and reboard the bus, where Tim McLean sat towards the rear end. It was said during the trial that the only words Vincent Lee uttered were, "Please kill me." He would plead not criminally responsible on account of mental disorder. Stanley Oren would provide us with the details of Lee's motive. Lee thought that Tim McLean was some force of evil that needed to be destroyed entirely, which is why Lee would go on to mutilate McLean's body. He had also stated that Lee thought he was under the threat of God himself, and that McLean would kill him if Lee didn't act first. The defense and prosecution were in agreement with Uren, leading to Lee being remanded to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison time. Lee went on to be fully rehabilitated, and he's living a normal life with zero legal boundaries as of 2026. Tim's family has attempted to sue Greyhound, the Attorney General of Canada, and Vincent Lee himself. However, the lawsuit has been in limbo for a while.
And it took a long time to really want to get up every day. I was given a few reasons to feel that way, to want to get up.
One of those reasons, a grandson. 5 months after Timothy McLean's death, his son was born.
I was in shock, and then scared, and then excited, and then really worried.
The mother was young, struggling to care for 2 other children by a different father. In 2016, a judge gave Dedeli permanent guardianship.
And that is the case of Vincent Lee, forever remaining one of Canada's most brutal and unforgettable crimes.